Hey everyone, welcome back to the Content Matters podcast. It's November. I don't know if I want to say woohoo or oh my God, but that's okay. I want to welcome to the podcast Carrie Hane. She's a strategic leader, 20 years experience driving organizational transformation through innovative solutions. She's co-author of Designing Connected Content, and she has shaped sustainable digital communication practices that deliver long-term value. And Carrie's got quite a career. She's worked at digital agencies. She's been an in-house leader. She works with lots of diverse teams. She teaches a graduate level course in content strategy at a university in Austria right now. So that's kind of exciting. And so thank you for joining us, Carrie. I appreciate it. This is close to Thanksgiving for our US watchers. So I appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thanks. It's great to be here. And yeah, my career sounds impressive when someone else reads it.
I'll have to get someone to read mine someday and see if it sounds just as impressive. I'm not sure it would, but all right. So we've got a good conversation today: content modeling, domain modeling, how it all works in an organization, and we're going to kick it off to kind of start with. We talk about content strategy mostly from a content marketing perspective, and which is fine. It absolutely has a thing there, but it's much, much wider than that. And I want to start off by just you level setting the kind of the discussion on what are we talking about, why do we need to talk about it from a more holistic level.
Yeah, it's funny, you mentioned the teaching. Yesterday in a class, we were talking about content ecosystems and bringing home the point that content ecosystems are way more than marketing. And when we think in silos, all we're thinking about is our own stuff and what we're doing, and not how it connects to the rest of the organization. And there is content in literally every department of an organization. Um, and it's not coordinated. I mean, very few, if any, organizations have any means of coordination, whether that's a person who's in charge of it or a committee or something. It's it, it's just and I think it's just because it's so big, right? If we start thinking about the whole organization's content, and how that might help us with marketing, it gets complicated and complex fast.
Yeah.
And now, and if no one's in charge of it, then no one has the authority to get people to work together, and it really involves a lot of collaboration. Um, so the other so there's marketing, and that gets a lot of attention, especially content marketing. There's also a lot of I also work with documentation teams, tech docs, communications, and what we find often in our work together is people people use documentation to evaluate a product.
Yeah.
So that should be a consideration for marketing, but they're in different systems, they're in different websites often, and they're just like siloed off, and never the two shall meet. So we're missing a lot when we think of marketing as a specific type of content that it has a specific goal and doesn't touch anything else. So it just um, yeah, it frustrates me when we're only talking to marketers and about marketing. And this is the thing I told my students. I'm like, there's a lot of things out there, but it's all about content marketing. A lot of them are marketers.
Right.
So all the things we talked about apply to marketing, but not just to marketing. So it's better. We open up so much more possibilities and more opportunities when we think holistically about content across the organization.
And it's interesting, right? Because I mean, you see the website, and the website is primarily a marketing based website, but they have the resource center, and a lot of more software vendors, especially, are having, and even manufacturing companies have their documentation set on the website, but it's like it's managed by a completely separate team, and they don't have anything to do with each other. And in the age of answer engine optimization, when that's the kind of information those LLMs are looking for when you're asking them questions, you would think the organization would kind of stand back and look at it more holistically.
Yeah, but no one ever has.
Yeah,
So it's a new way of thinking. And this is kind of what I have been doing, especially over the last 10 years. Um, but yeah, I guess almost at least 15 is that like helping people think differently and changing their mindset about what is digital, what is content, how it all works together. And when people see how it all works together, like often that changes a lot of things. And they start going, oh, it doesn't have to be the way it's always been.
yeah,
Oh, this is an opportunity. And sometimes they haven't even talked to their colleagues before about this, but because of our work together, I bring everybody together. I'm like, okay, we need all of these stakeholders involved because they all create content that goes on the website. And oftentimes my consulting projects are about redesigning a website, but the website is your business. It's
yeah,
not just a marketing platform. Um, n- no matter what type of company you are, and it's less of a marketing platform for some types of companies than others. But yeah, it's that uh, it's that shift, and I honestly think a lot of people just don't know what they don't know. They don't know it could be different,
yeah.
and so it takes a lot of work to get people to take in new things and do something with it.
So, okay, so this you talk about this idea of a company needing to reconnect with its original purpose when developing a content strategy. Is that how you get people on the same page? Like what are you talking about there?
Yeah, yeah, it's going back to why. Why do we exist? What is it that we actually do as an organization? Sometimes it and we can even go back to like what was the founder thinking when they started this company? What were they experts in?
Right.
And you can go back to all all manner of of things. I was recently at the Hershey in Hershey, Pennsylvania, where they have the factory and they have a whole museum of the history of the Hershey company and how it started. And you know, what did Mr. Hershey? I can't remember his first name, but you know, he started with something and then it grew. It wasn't, oh, I need to mass produce 100 zillion different types of candy bars. It was, I'm making chocolate. And let's do that really well. And I think in this digital age, we get away from that really quickly because we can go in so many different directions, and there's so many external forces that we're trying to manage. But if we can come back to that center, and say what what domain do we operate in? What is our domain? And answering that question is often harder than expected. But once you have that conversation and talk through it and do your modeling, I know we'll talk more about the modeling, but you can then focus on how to be the best in that thing. And then it will guide your content strategy, what content to create for whom and to do what. And when I do these exercises, kind of like, um, you know, coming back to your center, we talk of if anybody does meditation, that's the whole point of meditation is just coming back to now. And this is kind of a company meditation is like, okay, what are we even doing here? And taking and just really centering on that domain so that and then everybody knows it, like everybody this is probably something that's in the back of most people's minds and just they're not consciously thinking about it. So now we have a place for everyone to align. Doesn't matter what department they're in, what their job is. Now we know what business we're in, and we can rebuild from there.
Okay. All right. So, okay, take me, help me understand domain modeling then, and how, I guess I'm trying to kind of step up here and move our way down.
Yeah.
And you're saying it starts with domain modeling, but what is that exactly? And then this is kind of a weird question maybe, but how do you get an organization to think strategically like that when they don't give content strategy and content modeling the recognition that it really has needs?
Um, so let me start with what it is first, and then come back to how do you get it, because you don't. Um, um, so to me, a domain model is choosing your domain and then modeling the objects and relationships within it. So say we had a domain of urban parks. So things like Central Park. Um, I had a whole list of there's a bunch of urban parks, Balboa Park in San Diego, Golden Gate Park in San Francisco. A lot of big cities have these parks in the middle of them. Um, they're all what we could call urban parks. So that's the domain. It doesn't matter who is doing it. It's a universal truth that they have facilities, they have they have equipment, they have visitors, they have all things. You can call them whatever you want to call them, but it has to be a common language. So you're developing a common language about the things that are part of your domain. And then how are they connected? Well, people go to facilities, maintenance workers work on facilities, events are hosted at facilities, things like that. So they're universal. So anybody who operates an urban park could use that domain model to build on. And if we think of it as I like to think of this, I like the layer theory. There's a lot of different layers, but when we have this solid, stable foundation that rarely changes,
Mhm.
Central Park's kind of been the same for 100 years, or 125 years, however long it's been about that. Um, how we talk about it, how we access it has changed, but the idea itself hasn't. Um, and so we define those objects, how are they connected, and then say, okay, here's where we're operating. And then we can say, okay, how, then we can move into content modeling and content strategy. That's just one thing you can do with a domain model. And that's the thing I focus on. But you could develop a programs from that. You could develop a business strategy from that. You could develop an e-commerce strategy. Like there's many strategies that could form out of that. And they wouldn't be the same for everybody who's using that domain model, but it would be the same foundation.
Yeah. Actually, that's interesting, because I assume companies kind of sort of do it, but they don't call it that, maybe in a way.
Um, I I view this. I probably the closest would be like branding. I mean, this is
Yeah.
kind of a brand level exercise. So a lot of companies don't do it. And when I have engagements with clients, I often don't do it. Sometimes I do it for myself just to ground myself. It has been a way for me to learn a new domain, because in consulting I work with all different types of organizations. I don't have a certain vertical,
Right.
so I have to learn, about art, the art world and urban parks and manufacturing tiny little pieces, all these kinds of things. So doing a domain model for me helps understand what's happening anyway. And it allows me to ask different questions than they're used to, like, where do we put this on the website? Or what newsletter are we sending out? It grounds us in, okay, who cares about this? Um, and we can segment things in a way that it also matches more of the user's mental model, the audience's mental model. Because we're not talking about our stuff, we're talking about things everyone kind of understands.
Right. So, okay, so where does the content model kind of map into that then?
Yeah. So content models. content model has many meanings,
Yes.
um, ranging from like basically a web page template and what are we putting on this, like what is the template for this page. That is not how I define it. That's way too tactical. And it's not a model, it's a page template. Um, I'm talking about the other end, and then even when you get conceptual, it gets fuzzy. So my next thing up from a domain model is a content model. And I think of it as a strategic model where it's very similar to the domain model, but now we're saying, okay, here's the domain. What about that domain do we want to represent with our content? What content types do we need? Because how we represent all those things, those objects in the domain may not match exactly to the domain. We have to think. Then we from there we start thinking once we have our content types and how those are related, we can then start thinking about how we structure them and then how we build those out in a CMS or other type of database, and turn that content into data. But it's so the domain is universal and then the content model is for the organization. How are we representing ourselves within this domain? And that's where no organization is going to have the same content model, even if they do the exact same thing, which nobody does. Like there's
Yeah.
no exact replicates out there.
Yeah.
But so and then that starts this content strategy conversation. Like, okay, well, who are we making content? Who needs this? What do we want them to do? What do we have if you're not starting from scratch? You have stuff. Maybe all of that's good, maybe it's not, then we can reclassify it, um, as these types of and then those types can get represented many different ways in a website, in an app, in documentation, in user guides, in kiosks, in
Yeah.
whatever. And so that it starts to help tell your story too. That's the other thing I find is there's central domain objects, central content types that you're like, oh, like almost everything is connected to our product if we're selling a product. And then you see how everything connects, and then that changes how you develop your content.
So when you go in with companies and you do this kind of work, like who are you working for? Like who brings you in?
It depends. I've worked with, marketing departments, some places have dedicated web teams. So we're doing this as part of a website redesign. Sometimes it's at one time, I don't, design teams. It's kind of whoever learns about it and is in charge of a project that or has the the authority or the capacity to do the work.
Right.
So it's a variety. And then, like I said before, once we get started, they're my main point of contact and they're doing the work internally. But the kickoff meeting, I'm like, okay, here's who needs to be at the kickoff meeting. And then when we get to certain points, when do you need to present to your executive team? When do you need to present to the board? What do you need to present? It's not the content model. It's usually mock-ups of the homepage because that's what people want. But
Yeah.
that homepage comes later and it's built on all of these things we've done before. And that's just an example for a website. There Today we would be talking about other things. I'm getting started on a project where I'll be doing just that, like how do we organize all of this and structure it to work for answer engines in LLMs and
Yeah.
whatever AI type things we need to also have our content in. But it it's just to me, it's one more channel, one more output, one more context.
Right.
Um, because when you start with that structure and that solid foundation and know what everything means, that's all the computers and the bots want. They just want to know what things mean,
Yep.
and then they can connect them and serve them up to whoever's asking.
when in your work, have you ever seen like a really what are the most common mistakes that you see companies or even the groups that you're working with make when they're trying to do this work?
They think about only the website,
Yeah,
only single web pages, um, and not how they're connected. And that is a challenge when now you're not. a- And I think AI brings this challenge to the forefront. Is when you don't know who's looking at it, exactly what it's going to look like. How do you create that content?
yeah,
And that's a huge challenge. And because you have to think, you have to go back and think, okay, what is this thing? Um, and any one piece of content needs to have an audience and objective. That's often missing as well. Um, and so, but when you start developing the content types, you think about that kind of once, like, okay, this type is for these audiences, and it's just a handful. And then when you divide it up into smaller fields, maybe audience one only needs 3 bits, but audience because they're just novices or researching something. But when you get down to an expert level, they want all the information. So you can write differently in different parts, but you have to chunk it up into those and know how to chunk it up. And then now we also have to think about AI as a consumer of the content. And if we're thinking about a landing page and it's one use for one campaign, like that literally means nothing to a computer, to the bot. And it probably shouldn't be ingested into the AI. It's going to be, but so we need to think more about, okay, well, what if AI uses this? What is it? What are we telling the computer about this? And we haven't really been thinking about that. We've just been thinking about the page or document construct, and now it's 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 not never. We're always going to have websites. We're always going to have apps, um, but more and more people are coming in without that context. They're not seeing everything else around that bit of context. So how do we create that context organically so that it doesn't get taken out of context, so it can be applied to questions people are answering, and then the AI can find it and know
it
what they're
seems
finding.
yeah, yeah, it seems to me that companies are probably in I guess you'd probably say marketing or web teams, because that's the website is kind of the big discussion right now, are probably really struggling to figure out how do they redesign those web experiences or websites that they are more the content's more structured
Hmm.
and is more ingestible by these LLMs, because you're right, they aren't going back to the website. They're just getting their information in like ChatGPT or Claude, and that's the answer they get. And if you haven't presented it in the right way for that LLM when they ingest it,
Hmm.
you're kind of screwed, really.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, it's a new paradigm. And but this isn't a new way to do the work. It's a new way for some people, but there's been a lot of us who have been talking about it for decades. So
Yeah, I
there's a
was gonna
lot
say,
there's a lot of knowledge out there, for how to do this and how to be ready for this, and how how you be ready for whatever comes next, because something will come next. AI isn't the end of of
yeah,
technology evolution.
yeah. It's the big shocker for most people, though. So this process that you talk about, is it different, easier for a company that's just starting out versus someone who's already years of into their existence and they've already got all these established processes and content models and strategies, or maybe don't even have them at that point, right?
Yeah, I don't think so, because to me, models are a future vision. So whether you've been around for 150 years or 150 days, we would do the same thing. It's what you do after you model that would change. Obviously, a new company would have to develop content from the start. An older company would have to then go and audit and map what they have. It does make it easier to audit content because now you're like, okay, here's the content we need. Let's compare the content we have to that, instead of just making judgments about whether this is good or bad, which is often what happens in audits. And that's important, but that's not the only thing. Like, should it exist anyway, even if it's good?
Yeah.
How is it serving our audiences? How is it serving the business? Is it still relevant to our strategy, or should we get rid of it, or should we make some big changes to it? So that would be different for a long standing an organization that already existed and has a whole lot of content out there. But the 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 actual work of creating a model and thinking about your domain and your content strategy is really not any different.
Right. And so, if you, if, sorry, I had to trying to word this the right way. If you, oh my God, I'm horrible with this. Sorry.
It's okay.
You've got a new company coming on board, and they're wanting to do this. If you to develop a content model, a content strategy, on all that stuff. It doesn't matter if you say you need to serve AEO first versus you're the human first. Like, the content strategy is the content strategy, right? And it should
Yeah.
work for everything that you use it for.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Because the questions are out there. How are we
Yeah,
answering them? That's what our content does. It answers questions. It it educates people. It gives them information. It motivates people. It helps them complete a task. Like, all of these things, that it's an asset. And that was another thing I was saying to the students yesterday. I was like, content isn't new because we now have digital. Like,
yeah,
content has existed: magazines, newsletters, journals, newspapers, letters, memos. All these things existed long before we started doing everything digital. But we kind of tried to reinvent things when we went digital.
yeah,
I've worked through this whole transformation from when we had new media, back in the late 90s and early 2000s, to like, this is it. Um, we're not even digital first anymore. It's like digital only, which
yeah,
is also hard because you have to understand your audience. Not every person in the world is digital only. So we need to account for that. Um, just because someone maybe doesn't use their phone for everything, doesn't mean they don't understand something. And so we need to, uh, yeah, reconnect. Like I said, like, yeah, it kind of just comes back to reconnecting with our why and our purpose, and how we can connect with people. Um, and that's what our content does. Our content connects our business, our organization, with people. And that's separate from whatever we're working in, the subject area or the domain. Um, we have to remember too that this is all human to human. And making that, and I think that's the difference with the bot. Like, people are a little bit confused because it's like, well, now it's not human to human. Like, there used to be, a human making a website and a human would consume it.
right.
um, now we're like, now we have bots talking to each other, but they're only talking to each other when a human asks it a question, and then and a human's writing the content. Well, it used to be that a human was writing the
Used to be.
content. That's
Yeah,
a whole separate topic for a different podcast, probably. but
yeah,
but if we keep that in mind, that we're creating this stuff for humans, and the bot is an intermediary, like, what does the bot need to help us make that connection to the human, ultimately, on the other end of many screens and wires and transmissions over the internet.
I think that's a really good point, and I think even I never really thought of it that way, that ultimately it is all in service of a human, and you still need to think that way when you're creating these models and your strategy, content strategy, and in any strategy that you're building. Think, even though you know it's getting consumed by, an LLM, and it's a conversational AI coming back and talking to you, it still has to translate it into a way that a human can understand it. So if you're doing that right from the beginning, if your strategy and your model speaks that way right from the beginning, you're probably miles ahead of
Yep.
another company who's not doing it that way.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I've recently talked with a client that I worked with in 2018, 19, not too much into 2020, or maybe it was 1920, whatever. They launched their website in September 2020, after we had done work together on their model and transforming how they thought about the content they were delivering. Um, and so that was 5 years ago, and it's not exactly the same as when they launched. Things have changed. They've moved some things around, but it was all easy. They don't have to think about it. They just do what they need to do. And she said they're coming up on a new strategic planning interval. I think that they do 5 years at a time, and so part of the next 5 years will be looking at redesigning the website, but all they have to do is redesign the front end for current behavior and design trends. The content is not really going to change because it's solid. It is what it is, and they haven't really explored AI. They could. They're also connecting eventually to their catalog raisonné, which is another type of database of all the artists' work and artifacts and all kinds of things that's outside of outside of my expertise. But they, by doing the work that they've done now and doing this other work separately, it will connect. So that if they do want to apply some sort of AI on top of it, it will all go together elegantly for the AI to translate into whatever the human's asking.
Right. Okay. All right. So if a company hasn't really gone deep into domain modeling and content modeling, it's not too late, right? It's still, you can still kind of map it back and map it back in, and
Absolutely.
make it all work, right?
Yeah, this is not something. So, you know, ideally, we start with a domain model, we do a content model, and we create whatever representations of it, and we create our content, and then we send it out into the world. But we all know that doesn't work. We don't live in the ideal world; we live in the real world.
Yeah.
So we can do this work at any time. We can also do it in chunks. We don't have to model the whole organization at once. We could model a department, knowing that some of these things are, other departments need webinars, like multiple departments do webinars. It's not owned by one company or one department. um, Multiple people write articles. How are we going to coordinate that? But you can still model it for your department and chunk things up, and maybe make some changes in your CMS to chunk things up differently, and just do those little bits at a time. Do what you can. But yeah, we don't need to let perfection be the enemy of better in this case. And we can go back and forth. A lot of, the thing I always recommend is start small, do a pilot, see what works, see what doesn't, and then share that and grow from there. Because usually you'll have some new successes when you do your modeling and then develop content based on that. So then you can share them, and then other people were like, well, I want to do that too, I want the same success.
Yeah.
So building that, and then that grows more organically with an organization.
Okay. That makes really good sense. Is there the technologies that you use when you're content modeling and domain modeling? Is there any particular type of technologies that you work with, or is it?
I use Miro. Because I'm just making boxes and arrows diagrams.
Yeah.
So that's what I use. When I've done it in person, I use sticky notes or a whiteboard. And that's what Miro, Mural, FigJam, whatever you use are. They're virtual
Yep.
whiteboards. So that's how I do it. And just get people looking at the same thing, adding their ideas, moving things around. There's no code involved. And then it gets translated to a spreadsheet or that eventually gets turned into a database or a data
Right.
model. But and that's something a lot of people tend to start with spreadsheets when they're modeling because they're getting into the tactics right away. And that's why I'm like, no, don't. Like, so many people don't get spreadsheets, especially
Yeah.
when you're talking to all these different types of subject matter experts who don't do they're not web people, they're not design people, they're not even marketers. So they're yeah, but everybody understands boxes and arrows. And then that's visual. It's also very visual, which the number of times people say, oh well, I'm a visual learner, I need to have this way. I'm like, you know what, I think most of us are helped by visuals, even if we're not quote visual learner, the different learning styles. But seeing something and seeing how it all connects does something to all our brains and helps us process things a new way, which is the goal of all of this.
Yeah. Okay. So aside from the technology, like when you think about the people and the governance and cultures and organizations, like how do you kind of address those, or what role do they different people play in trying to get a content model, a domain model, a content strategy, like getting it all kind of running smoothly?
Yeah, well, so this is where change management is involved.
Mm,
Because it does mean people have to work differently, and think differently and work more collaboratively. And if an organization is not ready to make the changes to how they work, you're only going to get so far with this stuff. And that's what I have seen. What you had asked before, we didn't come back to it. How do I get people to do this? Like, I don't.
yeah.
They come to me and say, this is what we've seen this, we want to do it, we want you to help us do this. I have never successfully convinced someone that they need a model. um, if they're off and to the races doing something different, they're going to keep doing that. They're not going to come back to the model. So um, it's something that's why if one person or one small team or a group of people wants to start this on their own, they might be able to show how it works and make progress. But just trying to sell this as a project or a way of working isn't, I don't see how that's going to work, because
Yeah.
you have to build up to it. You have to have a champion at the executive level, and they have to be ready to say, all right, we're going to change how we work. And you can hire the consultant to do that when you're ready to do that. Or you can hire the consultant to tell you what to do, and then you can decide if you're going to do anything with it. um, but it is a transformational type of process.
And is it becoming more in demand because of AI now?
Should.
Yeah. Agreed.
But again, we don't live in the ideal world, we live in the real world. um, I hope it is. I hope that this is now the point where modeling becomes more relevant. And some people ask me, oh, well, is the AI just going to be able to create our models for us? I'm like,
Yeah.
not yet. They may be able to one day if we get enough good models out there, for the AI to learn from. They may be able to do it, but right now they don't understand the context. They don't understand how. to chunk things up. It's still to me a very you might it might be a first draft, or you might have a conversation. Here's my model. What am I missing? What questions do you have? You could have that conversation with it, but it's not gonna do a very good job of creating it. And if you're not an expert in modeling, you're not gonna know what's not right about it,
Right.
and what won't work, or what's missing. So I think for now, but what is promising is once you have your model and you have a inventory, a corpus of content that you're using, you could create new content based on the model. Like that's a great way to make sure you're creating content within constraints, because you say, here's my model, and the computer knows I need a title and a subheading and the date and an author, and this is an article, and I need certain images, and I need, what else is this connected to. um, if you have good metadata already, you might be able to, you know automatic tagging is another promising thing for for AI, but it's
Yeah.
not there with it's not possible without the stuff that it's learning from, and that's our content. And there's a lot of junk content out there, and it's garbage in, garbage out.
Yep.
So the model helps stem the garbage and keep it in order.
So how did you get into this? Like, you've been doing this kind of thing for over 20 years. Like, what got you interested in it? Why did you get started?
So I started before I started doing digital stuff. I had a job where I did a lot of different jobs within the organization. And I had learned to access and built a database for our members. So and that to me, like that's just how my brain works. That made total sense to me, even though I had never done anything like that before. I took a class, I created this, I used it to help and all this stuff. Um, and then I went and learned about managing websites and became a kind of a webmaster. And eventually the CMSs started coming out, and I was working at an agency, and we're like, we need to start working on these. So I started investigating them and like, I don't know. How do I get my page here in Drupal? And I was like, I don't get this. And then somebody showed us a website they had built in Drupal with all the structure in it. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. But because I had that database, that relational database knowledge, it made sense to me. And then I was working with fabulous people that we could collaborate, and how to make this work for us. And so that's how I got into it. I definitely did not call it content modeling. I was setting up Drupal databases basically. And then I started hearing the word content model, and I was like, oh, I already do that. And it just kind of went from there. And then my co-author, Mike Atherton, he gave a talk at the IA conference in 2011. I was like, wow. And that was kind of more about domains. And then we eventually met at a future conference and started talking about this, and um, developed this framework together, and then wrote the book. And, we, do our different things professionally. And I've gone, um, you know, see how this works as part of a bigger strategy.
Yeah, that's interesting. Is your book still available, right? We
Yep.
can put a link to that in the show notes so people can get it if they want to learn more about that kind of stuff. Okay. All right. So last question for you. If you could give one piece of advice to leaders who are overwhelmed by all of the content chaos in their company, what would it be?
I think it's just what we've been talking about. Take a step back, assess what's happening, and pick one thing to do next. I think we're eh, throwing AI at everything, or trying to fix everything at once, and it's just not ever going to work. But we haven't taken this time to go, what really, where are we now, and where do we want to be? How do we get there? It's always one step at a time. And maybe eventually you can have parallel things happening and you start multiplying what you're learning. But maybe it's the thing that's the easiest, maybe it's the fastest. Maybe it is going back and creating these foundational models and understanding and shared understanding and shared language, and then redoing other things on top of it. Maybe it's something that's super high impact, low effort, like a couple content types or a new content type. That's what I did at my last organization. Is we didn't go back and redo everything. We just, when we needed a new content type, we used a model and we went through it methodically, and that worked great. So you don't have to solve everything at once, and you really can't. So I think that step back also is a reminder that it didn't get to where it is now overnight. It was years or decades, and it got tangled up over that time as we added new technology and new channels and all the stuff that builds up onto each other. And it's going to take some time to untangle it. You don't not you know We don't all have years to operate in, but you can take a couple months, slowing down to speed up eventually.
Yeah, and I think that's the key, slow down to speed up, because
Hmm.
we're all gonna have to get there, but there's not a rush to get there. If you want to do it the right way and be successful, take your time and really be careful how you do it.
Hmm. Hmm.
Well, thank you, Carrie. This has been a really good, interesting conversation. I learned about domain modeling, which I think I might have already known after you described it, but I never really thought about it in the context that you described it in. So it's been really interesting.
Yeah. Well, it's been fun to talk about it.
Yeah. And I will definitely put your book in the show notes, and if your classes too at the university, I'll make sure people can link to those if they want to see what you're teaching over there and they want to be part of that. That would be interesting too.
All right. Great.
Okay. All right. And so thank you to our sponsor. The Content Matters podcast is brought to you by Discover CX by Ingenix. Ingenix helps companies make content easier to create, manage, and deliver so customers can find the answers they need. Discover CX is built for teams that need to deliver customer portals, help docs, and success sites. That's all about technical documentation, write once, reuse everywhere. Pull your content together from different sources into the CMS and publish it to any channel. Discover CX has built-in XML authoring, artificial intelligence. They have Gen AI, some nice new features there. The customer portal and headless content delivery. It's a modern way to deliver customer experiences. So I would suggest you check out ingenix.com or discovercx.com to learn more about what they offer. And while you're on either one of those sites or on our LinkedIn, the LinkedIn company pages, sign up for our newsletter, because we like to keep you up to date there on what's upcoming on the podcast. And only one more episode this year. Wow. It's been a year. All right. Well, thanks, Carrie. Again, thank you very much. I appreciate it. And thanks everyone for watching.
All right. Thanks for having me.